so many young men moving to the right? Look to Red Pill podcasts, which are teaching boys some terrible ideas. On this episode, I look at the Whatever podcast, which is exploiting OnlyFans models and other young women and hurting young men in the process. I'm Amanda Marcotte. Welcome to Standing Room Only. After the 2024 election, the media really wanted to know why so many young men had voted for, well, you know. The press looked at influencers like Joe Rogan or Ben Shapiro. But there was far less focus on the even rowdier world of online dating shows aimed at young men and boys. Much of this stuff is only tangentially about dating. Really, it's just misogynist propaganda. Brian Atlas wants you to hate women. His show is technically called Dating Talk, but because he hosts it on his Whatever YouTube channel, everyone just calls it Whatever. I wanted to investigate Whatever for one simple reason. It's ubiquitous, but no one in the media seems to be talking about it. Brian has nearly 5 million subscribers on YouTube alone. But when I talked to political experts, almost no one had heard about it except for people that research online radicalization. But everywhere you look online, Whatever clips show up. And often those clips feature major right-wing figures like Candace Owens or Dave Rubin.
What do you think about feminism, Dave?
I think that third wave feminism has led to many of the problems that we're discussing here today.
Everything in life is a choice. I get to have a soulmate that I get to go on an adventure with and a beautiful daughter, and you get to have orgies.
You can still have a soulmate and a beautiful family and do porn.
So you wouldn't do a threesome with your husband?
Absolutely not, because he's my husband.
So he wants to start exploring, and he's like, oh my gosh, maybe I do want you to like eat my ass, and I kind of want you to peg me because you're my wife and you're so beautiful and hot.
I think it would probably indicate to me that my husband was involved in some perverse world.
Candace Owens' husband is literally landed gentry in England. And that's exactly who I expect will be like, darling, I want to explore eating ass. I can't do an English accent. I emailed Brian and messaged him on Instagram multiple times, but he did not respond. His formula is unchanging. He seats a panel of young women, many of whom are OnlyFans models. Women I interviewed who've been on the show said that they often film for 7, 8, or 9 hours without breaks or food. The exhaustion and hunger lead to all sorts of weird behavior. From that, he generates clips, which provoke a toxic mix of lust and fury in certain kinds of dudes. You can see the impact that Whatever had on Charlie Kirk, who then went on to replicate the debate young girls routine. Brian is selling misogyny, but women are the key to Brian's success. In some cases, Brian uses them as proof of ugly stereotypes that women are stupid, greedy, or shallow.
I sent him a picture of the Chanel bag that I wanted, and he didn't buy me it.
It's okay for her to ask for a $2,000 bag?
I mean, yeah, I think it's okay.
What would you want the minimum yearly income to be for your future husband starting with you?
I would say the minimum is at least 10 to 20 million.
I mean, she asked what you want. In other cases, Brian puts out clips of women making feminist arguments, but then he frames it as stupid girl shit.
Do you consider yourself a feminist?
No, I'd consider myself a misandrist.
So a feminist?
No.
Well, what's the difference between a feminist and a misandrist?
A feminist believes that everyone is equal. A misandrist believes that women are actually better than men.
That would be female supremacy. Feminists will not push for said equality. They will not fight for said equality if the equality does not benefit women.
It's little more than a factory churning out mean-spirited clips meant to convince you that women are the worst, that they are reckless about sex.
There's definitely an underage footprint of me somewhere that the daddies are king off too.
That's actually not funny at all. It's
but
disgusting.
I kind of love it.
Oh, body count? Quick, Nala. What's your body count?
No idea.
You don't know?
No.
Probably about 45.
In a 24-hour period, what was...
Probably 3, 4.
Oh, wow.
That they're unfair to men who are inevitably portrayed as smarter and more grounded.
We're more likely to be victims of police killings and police shootings and police brutality. We're more likely to be incarcerated. We're more likely to delete ourselves. We're less likely to get sponsorships for college. We're less likely to go to college. More likely to be homeless. Do you want me to explain why men care about body count?
I got it.
I haven't told you the reasons why men care about it.
You don't have to mansplain it to me. I'm okay.
What, mansplain? That's kind of a sexist thing to say. The first time a girl comes over to my house, I want her to fold my laundry. The first time y'all go to a guy's house, he wants to blow his load in your face.
Wow.
He wants to inside you. And many of you oblige them. So you'll let a guy in the back of your throat, but I'm fucking Mr. Wholesome over here. Let's do some laundry. I'm the bad guy, but y'all be choking on.
One researcher told me that kids as young as 8 years old watch this stuff. Hard to miss the message to young men that modern dating is a fool's errand because wokeism has turned women into a bunch of greedy harlots. Never mind that whatever is so manufactured. It's a bunch of older men debating younger women, some of whom are just teenagers. Plus, the men get to prepare. Sources told me that a lot of the girls think this is just going to be a silly dating podcast, not fascist agitprop. I spent hours looking at clips and even interviewing women who were on the show. You can read my full-length article about this at salon.com. My guest for Pass the Mic, Erin, who goes by the online name Straighterade, was one of those women. With whatever, I really saw how much courage, fortitude, and cunning that women have, even as Brian portrays these women as nothing but bimbos. First of all, you have the women, like my guest Straighterade, who fight back.
Would you say abortion is murder?
Oh, of course, 100%.
Do you think that people who procure abortions, women specifically,
Yes.
a woman who procures an abortion should go to jail for getting one?
Absolutely, yeah. They're the moral equivalent of Auschwitz.
Millions of women are,
No,
are
not the
basically
women.
the same as like
Not the
death
women. No,
camp
the
guards.
women are victims. They're lied to. 90% of women do not see an ultrasound before they have an abortion. They have no idea what's happened to them. They're the victims here. It is the abortionists that are doing this.
Wait, no, I'm sorry. If women are the victims here, why should they be jailed?
Well, I don't believe they should be jailed. I
You
think
just said they
the
should be
abortionists.
jailed.
How is it that
the
you
abortionists,
could believe that
the
abortion
doctors-
is murder, but a
no, no.
murderer shouldn't
No,
go to
no,
jail?
Again, they're awesome. It's also true that this show is thick with pick-me girls. Those are the girls who play dumb, or say they agree with all this sexist bullshit, or they brag about sex in a way that you know it's a put-on. Basically, it's women telling gross men all the things that they want to hear.
Do you date men or women?
Oh, men. I'm so attracted to men. Like, I need dick. But, like, when I'm drunk, like, women, obviously.
Do you consider yourself a feminist?
No,
No.
not really. Yeah. No.
No?
Depends on how you define it, but no.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. You talked about submission. I think a lot of women view that word as an icky term, and once you,
What do you think about it?
I think it's great.
Honestly, if you took away my right to vote, I wouldn't be upset.
Any other ladies here want to weigh in on the voting thing?
Girl. Girl. The one at the top is so funny. She's a Christian influencer now. I mean, you gotta respect the game. But the one who's like, if you took away my right to vote, I wouldn't even care. I'm like, all right, come on, there's a line. Here's the thing about the pick-me girls, though. Most of them are in it just to make money. Like OnlyFans models trying to get new subscribers. So they're putting on an act knowing that dumb men will pay them. And I'm not here to judge sex workers for offering a fantasy. No, I'm going to judge the men that are dumb enough to fall for it. Maybe if they thought that women were real people instead of stereotypes, they wouldn't be so easy to con. The real story of whatever is how cruel it is. Just the process of making it shows how mean-spirited Brian Atlas and his fans are. I reached out to over a dozen women and only 3 were willing to talk to me about it. A couple of them just responded calling Brian an asshole. And again, a lot of the women who agree to do this think it's going to be a dating podcast. But then they're expected to sit there for over 7 hours.
Are you f***ing snoring? Hello? Are you snoring, bro? What are you doing over there? What's that?
I was feeding my Tamagotchi.
You're feeding your Tamagotchi?
Yeah.
When we explicitly told you before the podcast not to be on your phone, not to be texting, do you think that's the appropriate time to be doing that?
My bad.
What do you mean you're bad? Did you forget the pre-show instructions that Nick went over about not being on your phone?
It's not my phone.
Do you realize, though, if we were having a conversation and you were on your Tamagotchi while I was talking to you, that would be very disrespectful?
You weren't talking to me.
Overfeeding this Tamagotchi till it gets fat and dies is more interesting than anything you have to say, Brian. Oh, man. That's a lot of time taking verbal abuse. and some really struggle to hold it together. They can't leave or they'll be the subject of a rage quit clip where they're mocked for storming out.
I think she brought it up because the questions were...
Oh, is this a rage quit? I think it is for a moment.
Don't quit.
Yeah, listen to her. Don't quit.
I want to give her a hug. Like she's crying, man. Like yeah, I want to give her a hug.
That's the goal. Don't you understand?
No.
That's the goal.
It doesn't.
Take some accountability. That's not the goal. The goal is not to make people cry.
No, it doesn't.
You're doing that shit on your own. Take some fucking accountability.
I think you should just give her a minute.
She can say that I'm trying to make people cry, but I defend myself and I'm the bad guy.
I have obviously bitten off more than I can chew. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Wait, we gotta get through at least all your notes.
No.
Hold on.
Can this be a respectful quit? Respectful.
I will fast track. I will fast track your notes. You said it was a rage quit?
It's not.
I think it was a rage quit.
Thank you so much.
I think it was a rage quit. I think you can't defend your worldview. I think you're a coward, to be honest. I think it's cowardly for you to quit because you've been absolutely demolished by Andrew.
You did a great job, Andrew. Thank you.
But can we look on the bright side? She took up a lot of space on that side of the table, and now there's room.
You can't rate. It's genuinely wild how nice women are. He is so lucky he's never been punched in the face. It's just like, pick on someone your own size. I just cannot... I cannot say how much it's like, just pick on someone your own size. He'd talk to these teenage girls, but he won't talk to me, and all I wanted to do was ask him some questions. But again, I was just impressed with how tough women can be. One psychologist I spoke with said that in stressful situations like this, our brains go into survival mode. We're just trying to get out of there without getting hurt, mentally or physically. But these women get through it. Some of them even return. That's the case with my guest for Pass the Mic, Straighterade. That's how she ended up debating Charlie Kirk. Whatever is an overtly misogynist show. It tells its viewers to hate women. But if you look past all the cruel marketing, you can see it's not women who are the problem. The people that I'm worried about are the guys that are stupid or mean enough to buy what Brian Atlas is selling. My guest today is Erin, who goes by the online name Straighterade, and she's been a guest on Whatever a number of times and has agreed to talk to us about it today. Thanks for coming on Standing Room Only, Erin.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to start by just hearing from your side, because we've seen the clips of you on the show, but what is it like filming the show? What's the experience of it like for you?
It is a lot more goes into it than meets the eye. The show is more tightly regulated and curated than I think people understand it to be. You arrive about an hour early. The set is a lot smaller than it looks to be on camera. It's pretty much claustrophobic. There's like what feels like 20 different mics sitting on there, and the table is, you can kind of divine this if you see enough episodes, but it goes from like kind of most conservative on the side where the host is, Brian, and then coming all the way back around. The woman that they think they can farm the most, or is going to be the most outrageous, or is the most eye-catching visually, has like a cosplay on, red hair or something like that, typically ends up getting the edge seat. And from there, they ask you not to use your phone. They ask you not to speak out of turn. They ask you to restrict needing to get up and go to the restroom, even though you're about to film for it's like a 6 or 7 hour show. And they want there to be minimal interruptions. And then they get into it, and it kind of starts off as like an interview format. And for someone like me that's more familiar with this sort of like online media and podcast space, I know what to expect. But the majority of people that they have on, either they have found through social media by reaching out. Sometimes I've heard that like the recruiter, like the hosts and the people that work for them will just go swiping on like Tinder and like dating apps and invite women that they meet on there to come onto the show. And it's titled just dating talk, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, we're just talking about dating in the 21st century. But that kind of ends up, that's a Trojan horse for a red pill conversation agenda that they want to be discussing. And these women kind of serve at best to them, ornaments. If they don't want to really talk, they're just eye candy, visually grabbing, which is appealing for all of the people that can send in like super chats and donations to usually verbally berate the woman using TTS or text to speech. And then for people like me that have more familiarity with it, you know that you're going into the lion's den, the snake pit, as it were, and you're trying to engage honestly with people that are just there to do a show that is really viewed in clips. I think even though they pull high viewership, it's usually like less than 10,000 people watching it concurrently, which is still a significant audience. But the majority of the views come from the viral TikTok clips and Instagram reels that they upload afterwards, where they just need these small moments to really get their point across. And if anything, I think they're probably worse in long form.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a farm for those kinds of clips, that they're just trying to get the clips out of the long form one.
Yeah.
A lot of people watching this are kind of curious. You've been on the show many times. It sounds like a miserable experience. Why do you do this?
I find it to be intellectually stimulating in this very bizarre and kind of specific way, which is a lot of the ideas that they're talking about, they're not new, they're not novel. If anything, they're quite archaic and old ideas that they have kind of repackaged for a, like secular millennial Zoomer audience for the most part. But I do hear them repeated a lot, even outside of these red pill spaces. And the thing that's kind of refreshing is that even though every individual statement is usually like mistruth at best, or like an outright falsehood that they are saying and purposely, either because they want it to be true or because they think it helps make their point. Every individual statement might be, again, like it's like pathological how frequently there are lies on these shows being stated and asserted very, very confidently. When you zoom out and you make sure you're not missing the forest for the trees, I think they're expressing sentiments in a way that feels almost more intellectually honest than other people that realize that things that they're saying are not politically correct or controversial, but they will just kind of come right out and say it. So even if it's untrue, at the very least, you can have this kind of more open dialogue with people like this, because they're absolutely shameless with the things that they want to say about women, about culture, about gender in the 21st century.
I think a lot of people are going to be surprised that Charlie Kirk was on this show, because since he's passed away, there's been this sort of image of him as a good faith interlocutor, right? But you were on the show with him and you debated Charlie Kirk, and I would love to hear what that experience was like.
Yeah, so there has been this sort of rehabilitation of his image in light of his death, which is, to me, one that should be absolutely disregarded, because anybody who actually was familiar with any of Charlie Kirk's work, whether it be the earlier founding of like TPUSA, which was largely regarded as a joke, and if you look at polling data, like to the extent that he was popular, he was not actually popular among the target audience. He was more popular among like boomers that would see his media and think, oh, because he's this young guy and he's at a college campus, like that's who he's resonating with. So I like him. So he polled the most favorably with the people that he wasn't actually trying to get to his, into his movement, watching his content, etc. But young people either don't know him, or to the extent that they did not like him. But yeah, I'm not actually surprised that he ventured into these spaces, because he is like, he was at his heart kind of like somebody who would proselytize. And so he was bringing his message to the masses, and they love going into these spaces, because even though they're, confronting these wicked women of the West or whatever, they can position themselves as the authority that's going to tell these women what's what, show them the way, and, come off as the respectable man who is willing to bestow his presence among these whores, pretty much, and he can help kind of guide them to salvation. So even though I think that he is an example of a more frustrating conversation, because he cloaks a lot of his agenda when he's before these audiences that are going to be reaching the more mainstream thing, and when it would actually be more fun to kind of argue on his turf, where he's going to be more willing to kind of just be open about what he believes because you're going to his territory. He presents himself as this kind of like respectable guy who's doing it, but like he's not listening to actually hear out any of these women or any of the participants. He is there with an agenda, and that agenda is a right-wing Christian nationalist one. And I do not think that he engaged in good faith. I think everything was like he was listening to counter ideas, not ever to see if he could be challenged himself or maybe field information that he hadn't been privy to. He was interested in kind of imposing his worldview on everybody else. And to the extent that these conversations were interesting to him, it's just a way to get your message out, and it is a way to see where is the conversation at now. and what are people saying, and what, like, I need to internalize those arguments just so I can know what to say, how to better counter them instead of having to adopt or move my own position. He certainly wasn't interested in that.
Yeah, we've got a clip of you debating him, and it was really interesting because you did listen to what he was saying, as did other women at the table, and caught him in a contradiction. And he didn't seem to realize he was contradicting himself.
How is it that you could believe that abortion is murder, but a murderer shouldn't go to jail? The most glaring contradiction is that he doesn't actually think, so he says, all of these women should be put in jail, even though kind of makes sense that if you believe that this is murder, should follow from that is probably one of the worst crimes anybody can commit in any society. That would put you behind bars for life. But he said to me something that was very, very telling, which is, you're trying to trap me into this position, but I'm not going to say that because that is very unpopular. But to me, if you really, truly believe in it, and if we're following your logic to its conclusion, this is what you should be advocating for. This is what you should be saying is the truth. You know, like regardless of whether or not it's popular, if you think it's true, then come out with your chest and say it. And we can have a more, to me, interesting and robust conversation than if we have to keep it confined to what you believe you can get away with instead of just actually laying bare what you truly believe, and then we can talk, to me. So it was simultaneously frustrating as well as satisfying to see the way that he tries to get out of that, because there is no country that I am familiar with where they have eroded reproductive rights to the point that Charlie Kirk would like them to be. And it has not ended with women being punished or put in jail and prison at worst for getting these procedures.
So speaking of people who say it with their full chest, you got kicked off the show. Yes. You didn't rage quit, you were kicked off. So please tell me about that experience.
Yeah, be quiet.
Honestly,
I think
you had the opportunity.
Yeah, don't
you
talk
had
to
the
us.
opportunity.
Yeah.
So kindly, I'm asking you to leave.
Yeah.
This is Sparta!
You're.
Question for
You played the
Steven.
sound effect. There's no.
You gotta go.
Hold on.
Steven, would you
Erin,
let
you
her
should
in
go.
your polycule?
Bye bye. We love you.
Peace out.
Quickly.
Peace out. You too.
Quickly.
Shows in a row. Hello.
Oh, you're such a troll. I love it.
Anyways, can we like scoot over now?
I hope so, because I'm fucking cramped.
So the very first time I went on, I did DM Brian a reach out and asked to be on. And it was a stacked cast because the participants that I came with also have their own platforms, and they wanted to be sure to be able to rhetorically counter them. So there were probably about like 12 people. There were way too many people in the room. And they go around and they're kind of doing intro questions. And very, very quickly, to me, he asks me if I'm a virgin. And, you know, fine, I'm more than happy to have these sorts of open discussions, but I'm not going to be singled out or the only person who is, you know, answering these questions. And it was not given to me at a time where anybody else had been asked that question. So I said, we can get to that later. But later to him meant every 10 minutes, I'm going to ask her again, are you a virgin? Are you a virgin? Regardless of the fact that we were not talking about that, we had actually moved on. He kept moving the conversation back to this. And so at that point on principle, I just don't want to answer, not because I'm uncomfortable discussing that, but because why am I going to be singled out? Why is this so pertinent to know? It was completely unrelated to anything that's being said, and because I wouldn't just submit to his humiliation ritual. I was kicked off for this because they thought I was a troll for being obstinate or whatever. But in reality, to me, they just seemed angry that I wouldn't walk through their trap door, which is that, hey, you're supposed to come on here and humiliate yourself. Why are you not answering my very, very intrusive and personal question, even though I don't even know your name, or I've only gotten like your screen name? Why won't you answer this question? And to me, it's like, you know, sir, how many women did your mom sleep with? You know, like how many women or how many men? Is your sister a lesbian? Care to share? You know, what's your social security number? It's just 9 numbers. Why don't you share that? They want to ask these deeply personal questions. And to me, I need to see at the very least that is going to go both ways. If we're going to have these sorts of raw and open conversations, I'm totally down for that. I'm not even saying it needs to be in a space that's totally non-judgmental. If people want to judge me for these things, that's fine. But it needs to not go one way. So I was kicked off for that. And that's fine with me. If you don't want to speak to me, I can get up and leave. I didn't make a scene. They filmed me going out the entire time thinking I was going to say like expletives or fuck you. But, you know, if I'm not wanted somewhere, that's completely fine. And so I left. And then they asked me when I was getting he actually reached out to me, even though I was kicked off, to debate Charlie Kirk. They get lots of views from having these women that don't have any media training, that don't realize what they're walking into. But past a certain point, even that was getting old, even for his audience. And I think he brought me back on because I am more interested in not just the superficial dating talk, red talk, of anything. I'm there in spite of it. I am more interested in the political implications of this, or like aspects of like how it relates to feminism, and can go a little bit deeper on some of these topics. And I think his typical guest is willing to, just because they're in environments that they're not used to.
Where do you stand on this concept? Some people say you shouldn't go on these debate shows because you're just giving them fodder, whereas you obviously disagree because you do go on them. So I guess I just want to ask about your reasoning on that, why you have decided to go there.
To me, these conversations are happening regardless of whether or not I want them to be, whether I'm comfortable with them or not. This is clearly an element of discourse that a lot of people, particularly young people, are interested in viewing or participating in themselves, and sometimes even financially supporting, because there are men sending in $200 just to have these very, very brief interactions, if that's what you want to call it. It's a very vulgar way to put an interaction. It's usually to just insult a woman and like get her reaction on it or whatever, and live vicariously through these people. So this is happening regardless of whether or not I want it to be. And to the extent that it is personally entertaining to me to go in there and kind of throw a wrench, because they get comfy in sort of the monotony and the repetitiveness of every single episode. Because if you've seen one, you've seen them all. The trade-off that is being made is that the women who go on that have their own platforms are fielding a bunch of humiliation because they objectively benefit from it. There is a kind of insidious symbiotic relationship that goes on where it's like, we are going to verbally berate you and dominate you in the marketplace of ideas, quote unquote. And we're going to get all these views, but at the very least you get paid in exposure, and you are going to be able to say what your handle is, your username. You're going to get more Instagram followers, Twitter followers, and OnlyFans subscribers. So that's the deal being made. I don't have an OnlyFans to shill. I live stream. I just have a social media platform. And so I don't have any of those motivations for going into it. So I am interested in having the conversation that they say they're wanting to have. They say people on the left don't want to debate. They don't want to talk about these ideas. And it's like, no, I do want to talk about these ideas. I think if anything, I've gotten in there and I feel like they don't really want to have to elaborate and on their ideas. And they want to be the ones not on the defensive, but on the offensive and grilling you and asking you to justify it. But it's like, yeah, but I'm not the one coming out here with these hot takes. There are things that they just don't know. I was telling him, like, women could not, it was illegal in this country, in the United States, for us to open checking accounts and banking accounts without a spouse, just less than 50 years ago. That was not that long ago. And that was like, he didn't even believe me, Brian, the host, when I said that. And so I was like, how do you not realize these things? Because he thinks that, like, on paper, you basically have the same rights. So what are you guys complaining about? But, there's like so much missing to the conversation.
You can tell the women don't get to have phones on the show. They don't get to have anything. He yelled at one girl for having a Tamagotchi, but he's got a computer. Like the tilt on the playing field is so obvious, and it's just, it's so frustrating.
Ryan kind of likes to be the good cop, bad cop kind of person. He's the good cop, and then the co-hosts that he brings on, they're the bad cops, and they're the ones that are really going to like push forward, and he's going to help guide the conversation in a way that I feel ends up being slanted. I personally think it's more conscious than subconscious, but to be extremely charitable subconsciously in favor of his guest arguing for what is closer to his position, which he kind of keeps vague, and against the person that he's brought on. They do have an agenda, and maybe they don't know precisely how it's going to play out, but they do want to embarrass these women. They do want to show that they don't really know what's what. But again, it's like, but these women are just kind of living their lives. They're not the ones with these like hot takes and very, very strong prescriptions for how society ought to be. So to me, it is more incumbent upon them to be putting forth substantive arguments to explain why everybody should, and women in particular, should live their lives according to how they want.
We didn't really in the monologue talk about the super chat function. Guys can pay to have insults read to you on air, and that's happened to you when you're on the show. So what have you kind of learned from that experience about who is watching this show and who cares about this stuff?
It tells me it cannot be Zoomer men, because I'm like, unless they're going into debt and putting this on credit cards, where are you getting this $100, $200? So unfortunately, that suggests to me that it is actually at least men over the age of, 28, but probably under the age of 45 that are watching this sort of like humiliation porn for women that's on YouTube and on these mainstream platforms. And while they'll spend all of this time decrying how Western men are total simps, wasting all of their money on these OnlyFans whores or whatever, it's like, yeah, what are you doing? You're sending $200 in to Brian, where he's not even going to read out what you said. He's going to have a robot read out what you said to get the reaction of these women who don't know who you are. You're just an anonymous shit poster that has paid all of this money to have this read out loud, this, crude message read out loud to them to humble them, I suppose. But it kind of just throws them off momentarily, and then you just kind of go about your day, because what are you supposed to do with this person? Like, this is somebody that's Brian's more interested in keeping around. And I do always wonder, like, how much of these men will send this in, and then later their charges going through for the OnlyFans of one of the guests on the show, even though they swear they don't like them. But to me, it's two sides of the same coin.
This has been fantastic, Erin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. It was a really great conversation.
Erin, she goes by the handle Straighterade online. Go ahead, hype yourself.
So I'm Erin, also known as Straighterade or Straighterade_online. I'm a live streamer that's live typically Monday through Friday on Twitch and YouTube. And you can find me with the same handle on Instagram or any social media platform that you can think of, whether it be X or even my letterbox if you want.
Thanks again for being on Standing Room Only, Erin. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And stick around for Encore. The song I picked is a real palate cleanser. Hey folks, I'm coming to you from Philadelphia. I'm at Latchkey Records, which is a record store owned here by my partner. And my song recommendation of the week comes from what may be my favorite album of 2025, though there's been a lot of good ones, so it's hard to narrow it down, but I just keep coming back to this one. And it's called Moisturizer by Wet Leg. The song is Catch These Fists, and that title really kind of is very indicative of the style of Wet Leg. It was started by two women from the Isle of Wight in England. The lead singer has more classical training, I do believe, but they kind of moved towards rock music during the pandemic. Their first album was this underground hit with their song Chase Lounge, and now they have this entire full album out. Their first album is great. I like this one more, but really what's cool about Wet Leg, besides the fact that they're just amazing instrumentalists and their lead singer has this crazy voice, and they just are unique, but they rock out, and they draw from all these different influences like Bjork and like a little bit of hip hop and some pop music, is that they are just mean as fuck. They bring this like kind of feminist energy that is really cheeky and angry and strange and wry and dry. And it reminds me so much of some of the great 90s bands that I love, like from Bikini Kill to Slater-Kinney in terms of their attitude, but it's very updated for the 21st century and has a little bit of sinister energy that I think that 90s feminist rock didn't have. I mean, you can see just from this title, like just the look on her face. They're crazy. Anyway, Wet Leg, they're super fun. This album is very easy to listen to over and over again. It's called Moisturizer, and the song is Catch These Fists. If you want more Standing Room Only episodes, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Standing Room Only started as a newsletter, and it's free to read. Click the link to subscribe. I love tips. These political battles are playing out in our local communities, your family, your school, your neighborhood. If you have a story, go ahead and drop me a line, leave it in comments, and don't forget to subscribe.